it's Denise Taylor, and welcome to this episode of Love Talk. Love Talk is the platform where we talk about love with wives in mind. This episode is going to be an absolute treat. You know, I've discovered that we learn from one another's experiences. And today we're going to be talking with Lisabeth Willis, who wrote the book Bounce Back. And in that book, she shares her story, her triumphant story of struggling with love and also struggling with losing herself. What impressed me about this book is the fact that she was so transparent in her journey, telling us the details of where she recognized she got off course. She also said something that resonated with me. It's what I encourage us with often. She's discovered that she had to grow personally. And in doing so, she found herself. Now, this is one of those times where my guest is not a wife, but that doesn't mean her experiences aren't relevant and that they can't help us. I think many of us will be able to relate to her journey to finding who she was. And so take a listen and enjoy Lisabeth's story, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey, I'm so excited to be here with Lisabeth Willis. She is a classmate from college. So I've known Lisa for a really long time. In fact, she not only knows me, but she knows Chuck. We're sorors. We're part of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so just excited to have her here to talk about her experience. I had the pleasure of purchasing Lisa's book. And
you were my first purchase. You were my first.
I had the pleasure of purchasing her book and reading her story, and her transparency of her heartbreak to wholeness, as she describes it, is something that I think a lot of us can relate to. So before we start unpacking your story, introduce yourself, tell us about your family, and then we'll take off from there.
Okie doke. I'm Lisabeth Willis, as you said, and we were college mates sorors. I have two children. I have a son, 19, and my daughter is 10, so they're 10 years apart. And we reside in Ohio. I'm an author, as you know, and also I have a sales career that I've had for about 20 years. And I am looking forward to just, I call Bounce Back sort of my ministry, you know, helping and serving women. And I believe it is a calling. All of our life experiences build us to who we are. You know, today, and who we're growing into or becoming, as Michelle Obama stated. So that pretty much sums it up. But I must say, I thank you and appreciate you, Denise, for allowing me to come into your platform, because I am a divorced woman. And when I first saw your invite to First Wives Clubs, I was like, wait a minute, she know I'm divorced, right? She bought my book. She was my first purchase. So I definitely appreciate it, and I appreciated, you know, you explaining to me how you thought my story could bless some other women. So again, I appreciate it. You know, I know you and Chuck. I love you both. You guys are making it work and have done it. I mean, oh my gosh, you got grown kids, and to me, you know, we're watching. I know I'm not the only one. The rest of us are watching and learning and being inspired as well. Your peers, whether they tell you or not, they gotta be, because everybody really wants something that will work. And for whatever reason, some of us have had paths where, you know, it just hasn't happened. Some maybe because of, you know, what is willed for us. Others because there's some things we got to learn and grow through. Because, you know, that toxicity thing works both ways, male and female. So again, I thank you and appreciate you. Love you and Chuck, and just thank y'all for being y'all and for inspiring us. Oh my gosh, his running. Don't get me started. His running, watching you brand build, watching you support your daughter as she's becoming a beautician. See, you hadn't mentioned it, but I've been watching. See, so I just love it. So thank you again.
Oh, that's so awesome. I appreciate you so much. And, you know, it's interesting that you talk about wanting to serve wives who need help. And to me, I think that's where the collaboration comes into play. I am seeking to serve wives and help them thrive in their relationship. And you're trying to seek and serve women and help them get to a place of wholeness, especially after they've been broken. And I think one of the things that stood out to me is your transparency, which is so critical to reach people. And I'm discovering that too, because the more they can relate to our stories and the more we're willing to show our scars, and really the fact that they're not scars, but they're beauty marks because we've been able to transform them, that we can help people get to the point where they can start thriving in who they are personally. And so that is why it was so important for me to be like, hey, it's not about a title. It's not about being a wife, but it's about being able to make that connection from your experience, in terms of the relationships that you went through and how you had to overcome some disappointments, that I think is going to inspire people today. So thank you for being here. Now, bounce back. Okay. Now, this is something that when you read it, it reads like a Tyler Perry movie because there are so many different dynamics. It really does, because you were on this personal journey where you had these goals and aspirations of what you wanted to achieve in your own right. But it was almost like all of these things kept coming into your life to distract you from what you had a passion and desire to do, right? Like what you set out with. And I know for you, just like it is for me, I wouldn't trade any of those experiences because they helped me to become who I am. But the sense of disappointment that you have, right, when you set out trying to chase your dream, right, is just a little overwhelming. So walk us through that. What was that original passion and dream that you had when you were in Chicago, Illinois, and you had arrived on the scene?
Well, to be honest, I have to go back a little further than that. When I was a child, I sang all the time. I wanted to be Natalie Cole, I've got love on my mind and didn't even know what it was, and Our Love, those were my songs, as well as Lean on Me, by Bill Withers. I tell you, that's just who I was. It was like breathing to me, singing was. And so, like a lot of us in our generation, we were told to go to school so we can get a good job. That was our generation. Now we're at a different level where kids know they got to be entrepreneurs. They can have that job, but build it for something else. But for our generation, you need to go to school and get a degree in something you can use. So I started on the branch campus of Miami and then transferred over to Oxford. And I had no idea. I changed my major 3 times. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I started in nursing and was working part-time in a nursing home and just trying to figure it out, And so over time, I got over there and I told my mom, I was like, well, maybe I'll major in music or acting. She's like, you need to major in something you can get a good job in. So eventually I found my way to English because through my sister writing poetry, I started writing and I was like, oh my God, I have a gift for this. So I started writing and that's how I ended up getting a degree in English. But I went ahead, joined the corporate world, stayed in for grad school, joined the corporate world. And I was unfulfilled. I was 25 years old. I gotten a job with a big pharma organization in Chicago. And I was unfulfilled. Everybody was married, but me, I was 25, And the lure of Chicago itself was amazing because at the time I just knew, coming from a small city, I wanted to be in the big city. And I just loved Chicago. So long story short, I was did the corporate thing, but was unfulfilled. And one day I was listening to one of Tony Robbins' cassettes. Everybody knows Tony Robbins, the motivator. And so I was listening to one of his cassettes and he talked about, finding your purpose. And he said, if you really want to know what you were put here on earth to do, you need to go back to who you were as a child from your earliest memory. And to me, bing, it clicked. I was literally driving from St. Louis back to Chicago for work. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a singer. That's who I am. And I just went back to that and I said a prayer and asked God, for me to be able to do this. How I didn't know how it was going to happen. In my mom's mind, it wasn't really real. You know what I mean? She, and what I found out and had to realize that she also sang and had dreams, but, something happened that sort of had her sort of move away in fear from that, quite frankly. So long story short, I went ahead, And as life would happen, I'm on the elevator one day. I meet a guy on the elevator who was, a marketing director for a record label. And lo and behold, he takes me to a listening party. And boom, there it is. I got a position with, Who Entertainment, who was bringing back out public announcement with, they were working on Body Bumping and that whole CD at the time. And he was impressed with my knowledge because, we're Miami students, we do research, you earn that degree. So I knew, and what I knew about the music business, I had already heard horror stories about people being taken, not owning their publishing and what can happen with that. So I did my research. So, through sitting on a one-on-one talk to him, he became more impressed with my knowledge than he was my singing voice, which was fine with me. I just wanted to be in the mix. Although he was still supportive. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. So skip forward to working with the group and working for him for a couple of years, well, about 2 years, I think it was, I forget exactly. But when the album went gold, I think, the album went gold, the single went platinum, and they were busy. So I was busy. And then when things slowed down, it's time for them to go back to work in the studio, and there wasn't as much work for me to do at that point. So long story short, I ended up taking a position back in corporate and just doing like movie extra work and things like that, and eventually came back to Ohio. But that urge was still there, right? That urge was still there. And so my mom, because she knew I'd been in the business for real at this point, she agreed to watch my son and, keep my son. His dad was supportive as well. So I went ahead and started making that transition to New York.
And so there now, Chicago is big in the entertainment industry. When you say I'm headed to New York, that's the move.
And I've always loved the feeling of New York. As an adult, when I went to visit, Sharice was there. My son Sharice, she had been living in New York for years, so she was who I would go visit. And so the person who had also introduced me to the music industry, Robert, he had then gone to New York as well, because the music business there in LA, and so I would go, back and forth to visit Sharice, and she was introducing me to people as well, because she was doing modeling and videos and commercials at the time. So it was like so real for me, right? So at one point she came back here and was going to let me sublet her place, and I was just going to leave here and just go and eventually bring my son. And to sum it all up, my son needed me here. One night I was on a call, and I got a call from my mom, and she said, well, Chris told me, I keep telling my mommy to come home, but she won't. I got up the next morning, and about 5:30 in the morning, I think I left. And, I did not go back to New York for 9 years. But what's interesting is I was on emotion. I didn't pray. If I did, I don't recall praying, I just said, okay, I got to go home. This is my baby. That's my heartbeat, right? And so, but as I get on the road, I'm driving, and then I go through the Holland Tunnel, and I'm in Jersey. I happen to getting gas. I look at my tire. My tire had a huge bubble on it. It was going to blow. Okay, maybe looking back, maybe that was a sign for me, right? But I went ahead, took the time, got the tire fixed, and got back on the road. But on the road, I said, well, Lord, if I can't have this, meaning entertainment in New York, because I'm going back for my son, let me at least get married. You know what I mean? Give me something.
All right.
And that right there was the pivotal moment, because as I opened the book, it all began when I betrayed myself. And right then, because I betrayed what God put in me, those dreams and those goals, and the talent that God has blessed me with, it's to be used and shared with others. And so at that point, I let all of it go on that drive from New York back to Ohio.
And unpack that for me, the moment of betrayal to yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So I had all those goals and dreams, and the beauty of it is God had connected me. he opened that door. So I was in the business. I've met all these famous people. And then when it was time to grow and go to the next level, I had my fans letting me sublet her apartment. There were music connections that I'd met up there. That particular last trip, I'd gone to do some extra work on The Sopranos and to do an audition for Hairspray on Broadway. You know what I'm saying? These were big deals. So things that I didn't even know were real or could be real for me because of what I was told. So to be in that place and then to be on that drive home. Now, again, I don't regret it. That was my baby, right? That was my baby. But I also, over the years, I thought one day he's going to tell me, Mom, what if? Mom, I wish you had. And sure enough, that day came. Mom, why did you even come back? Because see, he's artsy. My son is a cross between, I would say, he hates when I say this, but I would say he's a cross between Prince and Lenny Kravitz. He's got his own following and does music that I joke and say I'm too young to hear it. So the language, as you all know, is colorful. But in any event, that drive home, and I let go of me. You know, I'm driving, you know, what is it? I haven't driven this, about 10-hour drive, I think it is. And it was just me and God in my Honda Civic. And I just said, if I can't have that, at least let me have Mary. And so I put it all behind me. And I didn't go back to New York for 9 years. So
when you said I let go of me, okay, because that's huge.
I didn't realize how much of the impact at the time either.
Right.
But I did.
And that's a long drive. So I imagine, you know, in my head, I see this crescendo, right? That's going, well, I guess that's one to go down, where you were up here in New York and you're making that drive back to Ohio, and you are losing more and more of yourself the closer that you get here, and you don't even really know it, because all that is fixed in front of you is, I got this sense that my baby needs me here. And for him to go back, like, why you come home? You know.
Then when he got older, absolutely. That's it.
Oh, wow. Why? That's amazing.
Why? Do you know where we could be? Who we would it's almost funny now. But, you know.
Oh, wow. And so just to kind of fast forward a little bit, right? For you to say to yourself, well, if I can't have that, well, at least let me get married. Wasn't even necessarily something that you were led to do, you know, that God said, but it's almost like you said, I'm going to pursue this and I'm going to have this. And boy, oh boy, what a roller coaster of a ride that kind of happened at that point.
Right.
So tell us as much as you want of your experience with marriage. And then really a lot of your book has nothing to do with the experience of marriage itself as much as it is the relationship that followed that marriage. But tell us as much as you would like about your marriage experience.
Okay. Well, it's funny you say that. Did I pray? Sometimes I wonder. But I just wanted to be, once I let that go, I knew I had to be like everybody else. I knew I had to have a normal life, because, you know, that New York and that entertainment, that's the dream world for those who strive for it, right? But, you know, where I am now, what we do, this is every day, right? Aside from our brand building and things that was left to do. So I just thought I'll just have a normal life and be like everybody. You know, I'm going back to corporate. And so networked my way in and yada, yada. So one of my colleagues from Merck introduced me. We were at a political fundraiser, and she introduced me to the man who later became my husband. On the surface, you know, you would have thought, oh man, that's kind of cool together, blah, blah, blah. At the time, I would say, I was okay in my confidence, but I know that I wasn't fully me either, because again, part of me was left there. So we get married. He then gets further into politics. And I would say I knew, and I put it in the book, so it's really no news, but I knew very early on that we were probably not going to make it. And largely because we were just two very different people. As you know, communication, the way you convey your affection, and your financials. Those are your foundation. And he and I really didn't match up in terms of those areas. Those are three of the pillars. So for communication, if something is wrong, I want to talk it out. I'm a communicator. It's what I do. What I learned about him and a lot of men, sometimes they are not good about communicating. Sometimes they need to go let it simmer. Other men don't really know how to convey it. They just assume it'll work it itself out, or some people do that. I'm not one of those people. And so there you have problems I felt building, right? The other thing, I'm not very materialistic. I think I was married to someone who was more materialistic than I. When it comes to how we communicated our affection, I come from a very affectionate family. We may not have had, and my mother wasn't married, so we may not have had a lot materially, but we had a lot of love. Both, and my grandparents, my mom chose, not to marry, but obviously I was around it in my family. And we just always had a lot of love, and we would hug and kiss and show our love for one another. Well, he didn't necessarily come from that, but he had it was more material things. So but it was weird because when we were dating, I didn't see those things, right? Because I think sometimes when you're dating, you're just sitting there, that's so
Girl,
cool.
you dating, you seeing their representative. I'm telling you that. You get you get to know somebody once you say I do.
That's so true. That is so true. That is so true. So I won't say, I don't believe, especially, we have a child that, we're co-parenting. So, I'm not gonna just say anything bad. I mean, anybody can say anything bad about anybody. I can't say that. I can say we were different. And I don't think that we're better off like this. And because we were friends before we got married. I think we were better off in that arena. Sometimes friends don't need to get married.
Right.
Yeah,
and you were at a much different place too, right? And especially coming back and being so used to a certain type of experience, I have to imagine whether it was subconsciously or consciously, the attention that came from that type of political environment feels very similar to the fast pace of what was happening before. And it can transition very easily where this can feel like that. And so there's got to be a little bit of a lure that came from that as well. And then you woke up like, whoa, wait a minute, like, let me make sure this is the right fit for me personally, it sounds like.
What's interesting is, when we first got together, when we were first married, he wasn't even fully a politician. He was on school board. That was no big deal, right? Worked a regular job. And then after that was appointed to, a position, a state rep position, et cetera, and then elections. And then, with that comes, the people that you meet. I've met, some phenomenal politicians that are still holding and running for office today. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. and Mrs. Obama. Even got to talk to her at a fundraiser. Even the late Senator John Glenn, which we sat next to him and his wife at an event, which was like, because we grow up, I was like, oh my God, So, and then, just so many others, I'm not going to throw all the names, but that whole thing and being able to go to, to see the president inaugurate and just all these things that everybody doesn't get to go to, that level of exposure, and to expose my son, being to the governor's mansion. We have a picture of, him sitting on Governor Strickland's shoulders, you know what I mean? So when he was little. So all of that, it was nice. It was cool. I enjoyed every moment of it, even though I don't necessarily like politics. I think, well, during election time, good people turn bad and get real mean. So it was beautiful. It was meant, and God has a plan for us all. But at the same time, I think it was my portion is, it was a part of my journey into getting to this day, because I was empty, because that was his journey. That wasn't mine. So some ways I was losing more and more of myself every day, even in that. even though I put on that happy face, even though I smiled a good smile and, could converse with the best of them, but at the same time, I was empty. And so eventually I started shrinking and becoming more and more quiet. By the time I got pregnant with my daughter, it went into full blown depression because I was on bed rest for 4.5 months. Meanwhile, my marriage was, deteriorating daily. So it was a very, very dark place. But and it was weird because at that age, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I could only, and I was 39 going into 40, I could see backwards. I would talk about who I used to be, what I used to do, the woman that I used to be. I had lost her. Do you hear me? She was, I would watch certain movies, and I'm pretty sure I talk about this in the book. I know I do, but, movies that I would watch over and over because to me, they were inspiring. I talk about, what was it? I think it was The Family That Prays in the End, watching, that, and listening to Gladys Knight sing I Hope You Dance as Alfred Woodard drives off. And I would just sit and I would cry, some of it was depression. Some of it was just, who am I? Who is this girl? There was a part in, I believe it was Meet the Browns, where the young man is in the hospital and Lettucey's song, I think it's All Right. I can't even think of how it goes right now, but All Right comes on and it's like, man, I didn't know how to get back to me. And eventually things just continued to deteriorate and, my marriage ended and it needed to end. No regrets there. Cause like I said, we're better off here in this place.
And what I love is that you guys have a very strong testimony now that you indicated co-parenting. And so even though you all may not have been able to survive the marriage aspect, you have a very beautiful daughter and you can still be responsible together for her in a co-parenting way. And so, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of lose it, right? Is that they believe the relationship is broken and can't figure out how to transition to a different state, even though we couldn't make it.
It was not easy. Let me be very clear. My daughter's 10 now. So I left when she was 9 weeks old. So it was very hard. I had an ugly divorce, semi-public divorce. We haven't always been okay. You know what I mean? I do have full custody, but I respect his place in her life. Even when he had his challenges, there were things that went on that my daughter had no idea about until it was time for him to let her know, because of the fact that I felt like she deserved to have him as her hero. Right? I know what it's like. I knew my father growing up, but we were not close by any means. Right? So with my daughter, I knew she deserved to have him as her hero. And even now, like there's something she wants to do, I'll ask him for his opinion, because he is her father, and I respect that. I respect his place in her life. I think I should always have full custody of my baby. But like I said, he knows if she wants to go hang out with him, she does. And if he's like, well, she's coming with me on Wednesday, I'm just going to pick her up. Okay, cool. Bro, that's his daughter. Who am I? So I think with some people and granted, we've been divorced almost 10 years. There is no emotional attachment. You know what I mean? So it's easy to be like this. And for me, because I knew very early on in our marriage that things were probably not going to make it. I think part of my emotional withdrawal began before I left, if that makes sense. So a lot of times, we leave before we leave. Men do as well. And sometimes women who are caught off guard, they don't realize. And women as well. But even though it was communicated, but it didn't,
before we leave is a very, very good point, because we begin to distance ourselves emotionally before many, many times before we take that step out the door. There's a lot of calculation that happens in those moments. I can relate to, and I think this is important to say, especially because many of us as adults, we have daddy issues, right? I can so relate, and I love my dad, right? And my dad has passed on, and I would never do anything to discredit him as a person because he's not here to speak for himself. But I can remember, and what I appreciate most when I was growing up is my mother never talked bad about him. She just gave me a chance to get to know him myself. Now, for as much as he was there for me and was not there for me, it wasn't a result of anything she told me. She just let me get to know him for myself. And so when it came to broken promises, they were broken promises that he made, right? Or when it came to him not showing up, it was a result of his own actions and not something that she committed to on his behalf. And so what I think is beautiful is that you are allowing him the space to be her father. And whatever he does with that opportunity and space is kind of on him to show up, to be her hero, to show up, to be in her life. And that's kind of what my mom did too. And, you know, the end result of that wasn't anything she said or didn't say as it related to him, is how he showed up in that space. Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Now, even with all of that, Lisabeth, this book's drama in terms of your life and where the real heartbreak came, because the breakdown of your marriage was heartbreaking. The facing divorce was heartbreaking. The losing yourself and your dream was definitely heartbreaking. And what you have even said here is that you began to realize that you were still empty in the relationship that you had in your marriage, and you didn't find yourself with that passion or drive personally, you know, and that you had to develop there. But what this book dives into most is the journey that you took in the relationship after your marriage. Right? So you went through the marriage, you went through dreams deferred, you went through all of those different sequences, and you lost part of yourself, and then you found yourself. I'm done. I'm walking away. I got my son. I got my baby girl, and I'm still trying to figure out who I am. And you get into a relationship, one that created a lot of soul ties. And when I mean that, there was a lot of knitting that happened with that person, and it took you on a very life-changing and traumatic journey, which is what you iron out most in the book. So take us through that experience.
Absolutely. And you know what, let me clarify too, just because I want to make sure I don't misspeak. Yes, growing up, I knew my father, but he wasn't exactly there. You know what I mean? He was there when I was born. We went through a space of writing letters. Then we went through a space of non-communication. Then, thankfully, we were reunited, and up until his death, by the time I was, you know, in college or whatever. So he was there, but I didn't have the pleasure of being a daddy's girl, so I wanted to give that to my daughter. After the divorce, my best friend at the time, bless her heart, introduced me to one of her husband's best friends. And it wasn't a match made in heaven. We were platonic friends for the first year. And eventually our friendship, you know, became a romantic relationship. But we bring all of ourselves into these relationships. So he had things that he had been dealing with in his past that, quite frankly, caused him to have some be sort of non-committal fully. You know what I mean? And whereas here I am not fulfilled, because remember, I left big part of that creativity and all that stuff God made me need. I had that somewhere pushed over somewhere, trying to make this normal life work, right? So needless to say, between my emptiness and longing for fulfillment and his non-committal, it was just a roller coaster for 4.5 years. And quite frankly, it ended with my heartbreak. But God allowed that, because I can be honest with you, there was so much back and forth for 4.5 years. In addition to that, in that time, you know, I'm ignoring that voice inside, that intuition, Holy Spirit, you know, people, I'm telling you, I know it was God telling me to let that man go, and I wouldn't. I was too afraid to do it. I was too afraid, but I know it was God telling me to let that thing go. Even my friend, she said, Lisa, she said, if you let it go, if it's meant to be, it's going to come back. Don't worry about it. Just let it go. And I couldn't. So God allowed a situation to happen, where, there's different opinions on how it occurred. But at one point we had picked out engagement rings and his ring. And I would say about, let me see, that was right after his birthday, which was September, right? So 2 weeks after that, he wants to end the relationship. Now, mind you, there was so much back and forth. I'm broken at the time because I had poured everything, all of me, into this relationship, in a romantic way. And now what was I going to get after 4.5 years of wasted time, right? So I hit rock bottom. I couldn't believe that. And then, at that point, I mean, my best friend and, had gotten married at this point. Mm-hmm. They had bought a beautiful home and they were having this huge event and they wanted everybody to be there. He and I had just broken up. He supposedly had some girl that he wanted to bring. She wanted me to come, but I was too broken to come. I ended up going down to Asheville with my brother. I have a younger brother and his family to get away because I didn't even want to be in the city. I didn't want to run into him and his newfound person, which was like right after we broke up. And, he allowed her into our space with our friends in a time where people didn't even know we were broken up. I mean, the city, it's a small city. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew him. Everybody knew me, just among certain circles. So it was very heartbreaking. That was my rock bottom. I will never forget that New Year's going into 2015 and 2016. I was so broken. I really was. But I thank God for it. Because if it wasn't for me hitting that rock bottom, baby, the bounce back would never happen. And that's true. Because I was so broken. But that is where God had to build me. I have never, nor do I recommend anybody disobey that intuitive voice. Because when things don't go in your favor, a lot of times we take it out on the other person, right? I know people and have heard stories of people who are polished and educated just like me, who have broken windows and scratched cars and all that. But the reality is, now I didn't go that far. Let me be clear. I didn't do that. But I did something silly. It's in the book. But it was silly. But it was, all I did was email the girl some pictures, which was still dumb. It was immature. But I wanted her to see that she was breaking up a family. And really she wasn't. God was letting all that stuff transpire. And the truth be told, their relationship was over within that month. So, or maybe within 2 months, I should say. But the point of the matter is, ignoring what God put in here is always going to lead us to disaster, right? And he's going to do what he's got to do to get us back on track because he loves us just that much. So that's kind of where my bounce back began.
And I guess when I read it, and I don't want to put labels on it that you don't feel are appropriate, but I'll say there was some toxic or unhealthy behavior.
Oh my goodness. Both of them.
I know all of this is hard to look into because it shines a mirror on us of how did I allow myself, because you use the term poised, polished, educated, experienced, professional. Like my personality is a very strong one. Like, how the heck did I become the subject of all of this toxicity where there was so much evidence of disrespect? There was so much evidence of manipulation. There was so much evidence of disloyalty and just all of these different dynamics. And I think what I surmised after reading, and I would love to hear your perspective, is that you were in such a broken place that your whole perspective of what you were experiencing and seeing was so off that you didn't recognize it for what it really was until you started to get that personal growth. And then once you started getting a personal growth, you can look back and be like, oh my God, that was foolish. I can't believe I did that. Oh my God, how did I even get involved in this relationship? It was like as if the cloud and the blinders were removed. And those can become lenses for us from so many different ways. And you had so much traumatic experience leading up to that that was left unresolved, unhealed, unaddressed, and you found yourself taking the piece of you over here, the piece of you over here. And what I love that I heard you say in the book is, I got to grow personally. I have to grow personally before I start dealing with all these people, because you started to see fractures in friendships, and you started to see fractures in your relationships, and you still had to do everything for family. And so, like, what's your take on the toxicity that you experienced and how you became vulnerable to that?
I think more so than toxicity, it was a lack of identity and self-love. When that drive going, I got to take it back to that drive from New York. I let me go. I lost Lisa. I lost me. And, during that healing time, I thought about college years, because some of that needed to be healed. I didn't know who I was. I was a young lady, all the naive stereotypes of the girl raised in church who gets to college and she ain't never really dated, and you already know, because she doesn't know her identity, right? So, then you throw on to that the daddy issues and things of that nature. I had to, after I initially came back from Chicago and came back to Ohio, I put myself, that was my first time going into therapy. And so I dealt with the daddy issues. And that's how I kind of realized I got to get out of Ohio and go to New York and take this thing to the next level. Problem was, I didn't stay to allow it to be worked out. I got on that trajectory downward when I betrayed my dreams, my goals, my identity that God gave me. God made me, right? So it was when I initially got divorced and I said I was going to spend that time honing into me, that's where I should have stayed. Instead, because it does get lonely, right? And this was an attractive person. He wasn't someone that I was initially attracted to, but our friendship caused it to turn into something else after a year. So why not? And then over time, when there's this, we see people break up and get back together all the time. It's just not healthy, right? We don't necessarily, for me, I didn't necessarily realize how unhealthy at the time, but I knew I was ignoring my intuition. I knew I was ignoring the Holy Spirit in me telling me to let it go. So I think the more ignoring of that, the more pulling away from my identity, the more toxicity came in, because I was holding on for a person to give me something that they weren't even capable of giving me.
Ooh, that is so good.
That fulfillment, that emptiness, that I call it the God space. Can't nobody feel that but God. But we often feel, some people fill themselves up with drink, alcohol, drugs. People, they don't know how to be still with themselves and to be whole. It was all of that and then some. I think the difference between me and a lot of other women who have gone through things, our stories are similar. We might not go through the same thing, but everybody's not going to tell you the truth. Me coming forward, you ask, what made me want to tell my truth? It's a calling of God. I don't really have a choice. And like you said, now I look back,
Yes, it's amazing when we get a fresh perspective and we allow ourselves to take that healing journey. And one of the things that I say a lot in the First Wives Club is that we have to be willing to grow personally in order to soar relationally. And I say that because a lot of it begins with us and where we are. Are we in a good place personally? Before I even try to deal with anybody else, am I in a good place? Because if I'm not, I am going to deflect, reflect, detect, all of that is going to project into that relationship. And I am going to be cancerous to it if I cannot figure out how to get myself and keep myself into a healthy place. And so what I love is your then journey to becoming healthy, your journey to becoming whole. Tell us about that and what were some of the key factors to that bounce back.
I just happened to scroll Facebook and I found a message from Angel Richards, who later became my life coach. And I was you know how people post messages, just free messages, talking, just giving tips and healing information. And I listened to that and I was like, okay, there may be something to this. So I started to follow, and all of that empowerment, that positivity was what I needed, because again, I was so broken. And in her message, she gave healing tips, because, how to, I forget what the message was, but a part of it was healing tips, because she had gone through divorce and had healed from it. And it was what God sent me at the time, because it was what I needed. So that was step one, was I ended up, I didn't hire her right away, but I started following her. I was also in a depressed state. So while eventually I did also, and actually I think it started really before the final breakup, getting a therapist. I also, I got on Prozac. I believe in, sometimes we need medication. I know that's not popular in the Black community. I think people are getting more and more open to it. But I've worked in pharma 20 years. They're $1 billion antidepressant. That industry is what it is. Those products are worth what they are because people are using them. And in my opinion, I think Black people need them most because of all the trauma that we unfortunately had to inherit and go through. But we don't always seek the help that we need. But for me, it works for me. And in addition to that, I experienced something called EPT, which is the emotional polarity technique, which teaches forgiveness. And, forgiving, that right there was a pivotal step. And that's one of the steps that I teach women to do, is to forgive others and to forgive yourself. Because to me, that's where your healing begins. And then I had to remember who I was before the heartbreak. Even to take it a bit further, who was I as a child? What influenced my relationships? Just a full life self-examination, which I still do from time to time in my own self-reflection, because we're always growing. I don't ever want to get back to that place again. And once I am in a healthy relationship, I don't want to lose myself. And that, my dear, I have a question for you before we end, because how in the world did you not lose yourself? And if you did, how did you get back to you? Because it's so easy when we're pouring into our children and we're pouring into our husbands and we're pouring into others, be it organizations, be it, careers, we're always on the output. But what I've learned through that experience is that I got to be true to me and love on me more. And so that healing process that God took me through is what needed to happen in order for me to bounce back. It wasn't overnight, it was a process. And I allowed it to work in me, and I believe in each one, teach one. And I felt compelled to help other women. I believe that is my calling.
That's, what's incredible is your courage. And thank you for being courageous to share your story and to take that journey and to be a voice out here for people who are hitting these points, but afraid of the stigmas or afraid of the stereotypes when it comes to getting help and support, whether it is therapy or it is medication or whatever solutions need to be there. So thank you for being courageous and being willing to be that voice. And I think you summed it up so well when you said you had to take that forgiveness journey, because I don't think we fully understand how much forgiveness is more for us than it is for anybody that's on the other end of receiving our forgiveness. the bondage that happens to us when we are holding on to bitterness and to anger and to frustration and to disappointment and all of those other things that rip away from us, that are so easily redeemed if we just allow ourselves to forgive them and ourselves. It's so free, right? It's the opportunity to be free, but it's one that we just refuse to take. And so I think when you share that, of how you could get there, you forgave yourself just as much as you forgave them for taking advantage of the situation. And I think that is such a huge factor to the smile that you can have on your face right now, and to the freedom that you can have when you tell your story, is because you're like, I made the mistakes, but I ain't bound by that. That is not who I am. And you can walk in the newness. And that example and that testimony is so rich for all of us. And so thank you so very much. In terms of me, girl, I fight after it. I happen to be married to a guy that sees more strength in me and believes in me more at times than I think I even believe in myself. And so God, he blessed me when he gave me Chuck. And it's not easy. I too, have to fight for who I am and not to lose myself in the roles that we take on, right? Whether it's a mom or a daughter or a niece, or like all these different dynamics, or professionally, the demands that come on. Who we are individually is just as critically important. And what we want, even though it can change over time, right? It can change over time. What we want is valuable. And so if you can find a healthy connection with someone who believes in you, I'm telling you, that is worth more than his looks, than his height, than his bank account, than any of those things, because he will help you bring out the best of who you are. And so that's my desire for anybody who is seeking a relationship, is we get stuck on all the wrong things. Find somebody else who wants you to be the best at who you are and help you grow in that way. And you got a winner if you can find that. And so I've been blessed. It hasn't been easy, right? I'm not going to paint this picture that it's been 25 years of a cakewalk, but it has been one that he is always there to cheer me on and see, more for us than sometimes I can even see. So thank you. All right. So I'm not going to keep you longer. I want to value your time. Tell me, are you open to love again now that you've taken this journey? Because that's a huge question, especially when you have been vulnerable and you have been hurt and you have reached a point where you're like, I'm back. You could be like, I don't never want to deal with them fools out there again. So tell me, is Lisabeth open to love again?
I am open. Okay. I'm definitely open to companionship. Yes. And when I read the questions that in preparation, I must admit, when I read that, I was like, well, that's a loaded question. Because I really had to think about that. Because am I open to it? Yes. I'm definitely ready for companionship. Am I ready for marriage? I would say I'm probably still getting ready for that. And at 50, who knows if it's going to happen? I think there's a level of acceptance right now that I'm dealing with, because the desire has always been to be married healthily in terms of relationship. So I'm definitely open to it. But one thing I must say, and I know this is probably an issue with other women, is I didn't really have day in and day out modeling of what a healthy relationship or marriage should even look like. So I find myself even now looking and learning from other women who are in marriages. For whatever reason, I'm in a stage in my life where, my daughter has friends, right? And they're PKs, and I've become really cool with their parents. And then one of my closest cousins, she's a pastor's wife. And I'm like, hey, God, these people minister and pour into me, and they're all in healthy situations. And one of them, my cousin, she actually married later, but it's always been a person that even when I was in the trenches, I could call on her, and she was like one of my therapists, if you will. There are a lot of wisdom that I get from those women even now. So I just think modeling is important, and we just need a lot of good.
There we go. You got some newly released books coming out.
Oh, yes.
And so I want you to share a little bit more information about those and how everyone can get copies of all of your books.
Okay. All right. So first I will start with what we talked about, The Bounce Back from Heartbreak to Wholeness was my first release. And actually I released it in 2017. I will at some point be relaunching, but it's still available on Amazon. It's available on my website, which is lisabethwillis.com. In addition to Book Lovers Book Log. This right here, because I am a book club member and an avid reader, if you can see these pretty pages, I don't know how they're going to come through, but it's a log for you to list notes. So, you're a hostess of your book club, the title, it gives questions, who your favorite character is, some points of interest for discussions, any societal messages that the author meant to come through. And it's pretty. I mean, you can see those colors, and then it's really glam on the inside. So tailored for us girls. I also have, I'm part of 2 anthologies. The first anthology, and I meant to grab one, but I don't have, I do have one handy. Didn't think I brought it, it was on my bookshelf. So this is The Weight of Success. This was actually the first anthology that I was in, compiled by Valerie Lewis Coleman. And it's sort of a synopsis version of The Bounce Back. So this came first. And then the other one is Girl Get Up and Move, which is compiled by Rynette Upson Bush. Again, everything is on Amazon as well as through my website, which is lisabethwillis.com. Those who are interested in following me, I am on Instagram under @LisabethWillis. In addition to that, Facebook.
Awesome. Well, congrats to you, and thank you for joining and sharing. And as everything else comes out, we'll figure out how to reconnect so that we can be examples for people who need to hear this story, because it's important. Just like you shared, there are so much pressure on relationships right now, and we need to continue to be help and light as much as we can. So thank you so much for joining us today. All right. I want to thank Lisabeth for being so open and transparent with us and sharing her struggles and her overcoming them. She found purpose in pain. And for many of us, that's the silver lining. How can we take what we've been going through and share it with others so that they know they're not alone and that they can relate to someone who's fighting on another day? So thank you, Lisabeth. And I pray that if you found yourself in her story, that you would grasp hold of the rich things that are there to help you get through. People, connections, and love. Love for yourself. I say it often, and it just rings true in what Lisabeth shared with us in all of our relationships. You have to be willing to grow personally in order to soar relationally. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Love Talk.